To begin, I want to reiterate a sentiment from a previous video. I haven't spoken much about relationships between the types on this channel because I have reservations about it. If you were to ask me, is typology useful in a company or in team building? I would say yes, definitely. So why would I advocate it for team building and working relationships, yet be reluctant with romantic relationships? Working relationships in a business, company, or startup have goals and measurable metrics for success, whereas romantic relationships are much more fluid and vague. You could say that happiness is simply the aim, but I believe that responsibility lies more with the individual most of the time. Applying typology to relationships can actually be quite dangerous, so please bear in mind that other things, such as maturity and being in a healthy place mentally and emotionally, have a far greater bearing on the success of a relationship than personality types. Also, this video was requested a very long time ago by a patron. You can request a video on Patreon or the Love Who website, both of which are linked down below. Speed and intensity. Both of these types live intensely, but ESFPs move much faster in life, whereas INFPs need time, space, and the ability to move at their own pace. ESFPs exist in a life-embracing way. When their dials are turned up to 11, they want to drown in nowness. INFPs, on the other hand, have more of an inwardly focused energy, a quiet, simmering intensity that can derive as much pleasure from being insular in their own minds and imaginations as they can from the outside world. INFPs have an abundance of, and are much more receptive to, internal stimuli. Since this is one of the biggest sources of conflict between these types, I'm going to dwell on it a bit. The ESFP might think that the INFP is being a bit boring, or, often, that the INFP is actually bored, and they just need to take some action, get out of the house, or their heads, to do something fun, in inverted commas, to push the boat out, and live a little. From the perspective of the INFP, they're actually doing good, and having a great time. It just might not look like it to the outside world. Based on this, I have some extrovert advice. Against my better judgment, I'm going to give extroverts a little insight into how you might lure introverts into social interaction, or just getting out and about more with you. Chris Voss, when explaining negotiation, says, quite counterintuitively, that getting to the point where the person says no is essential. No is a comforting word. It's a self-protection. If you say you don't want to do something, and the other person respects that, you feel safe. You feel like you have a level of control in the situation. But, also, suddenly the person who said no is now also more receptive to the idea being suggested. They can actually listen to what's being proposed without being distracted by that impending sense of needing to disagree or be combative. They have already said their piece. I bring this up because introverts aren't necessarily against frequent and intense social interaction. It's just that they're terrified of being trapped in social interactions. Any fight fans, boxing, MMA, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, whatever, will know that the worst feeling a fighter can have is gassing out and getting tired in a fight. You're confronted with the other person, in this case, someone who's trying to knock you out or submit you, and you feel like a shadow of your actual self, unable to operate in the way you want. This is what introverts feel like once their social battery drains too much. That is the feeling introverts try desperately to avoid. One trick, then, is to make social interaction always optional for the introverted party. Also, always give them ways to escape. This can be really simple, such as just asking them if they've had enough and want to leave. Simply the fact that you're asking reassures them that they have the option. Speaking from personal experience, as a social introvert, whenever someone has asked, "Do you want to leave?" I don't think I've ever said yes, at least not right away. So for the introvert, it's about them knowing that they're socializing on their own terms and have a level of control. Again, it's about building up that sense of trust, showing them that they're not going to be trapped. Should the extrovert always adjust their approach to the introvert? In principle, no, that's unfair. However, in relationships you have two types of asks or requests. If you want your partner to change, one is for them to stop doing something, and the other is for them to start doing something they haven't been doing before. If it's the latter, and you're trying to cause them to take action, especially if it's a kind of action that isn't natural for them, then giving them leeway is a good move. I think that many secondary problems arise from this introvert-extrovert divide, so it's worth investing extra energy into solving it. If there are recurring situations where the INFP is often being exhausted by the ESFP, that is definitely not sustainable, so it needs to be avoided and worked around. I have read some people say about this relationship that it works really well when both parties don't see each other that much. I find that hilarious. And it's your relationship and your rules, so if that's the approach that works for you, then go for it. But I've seen plenty of relationships between highly extroverted and highly introverted people work great, even when they spend nearly all their time together, so it's totally doable. The future and having direction. Both ESFPs and INFPs can struggle with having direction in life. ESFPs in particular, if they don't already have a path to be on that they are passionate about, tend to worry about their future. I'm of the opinion that direction is an important feature of a relationship. In some sense, it's important to be on the same path, or at least pointed in the same direction. There's no easy way to find purpose and direction in life. Sometimes it appears to you randomly, but it's important to bear in mind. Some people come into our lives during times where we're floating without direction. In that period, the compatibility is perfect. There's immense chemistry. But as we start to get our lives more on track and have responsibilities and obligations, things fall apart. Those people no longer have a place in our lives. This sounds quite grand, having a vision or direction in your relationship, but this is just the high-level way of conceptualizing it. It can be much simpler, such as having shared activities you both enjoy, or projects you work on together. Very straightforward stuff. It's something that brings you together for a common purpose, a common goal, be that short or long-term. It's about being a team. Finding balance. When you have people with quite different personalities, it's either a clash or a complementarity, ideally the latter. Often it's about finding the right balance, turning the dials of your various traits until they're calibrated well for the relationship and the other person. INFPs will often have a grounding and calming effect on ESFPs, which I think they'll find exceptionally valuable. INFPs are actually quite habitual, routined, and consistent in their lives, so they can be a nice anchor for the more flighty ESFPs. ESFPs can energize INFPs. INFPs often have many hobbies, interests, and, yes, ambitions too. ESFPs can be ideal catalysts for getting things off the ground, solving problems in the INFP's life, and encouraging, or downright forcing them, out of stagnation and inertia. INFPs have TE as their inferior function, so they have a contentious relationship with the organizational parts of life. ESFPs have it as their third slot function, so they actually enjoy that side of life and find a great deal of relief and comfort from it. So there's a really nice balance there where the ESFP is not going to get annoyed by the INFP's lack of organizational skill at times, yet they have more than enough skill in that area themselves to help the INFP. TE in combination with SE is absolutely perfect for getting things done, for powering through. Having introverted feeling in common can go one of two ways. Either your values and ways of seeing the world align, in which case it's going to be really straightforward, or they'll be in conflict, which usually will go pretty badly, since neither type will bend. You'll have an unstoppable force meets an immovable object situation. So, at the beginning of a potential relationship, I would spend a lot of time really digging down deeply into what the other person believes. Also, people aren't always conscious of what their values are, so you will need to look at their behavior as well. Let me know down below in the comments if you yourself have been in this relationship, or you've had a chance to observe INFP-ESFP relationships up close in some way. If you would like to see more relationship videos between the types, then like, comment, and subscribe. That's the best way to send a signal to me. Also, feel free to join the Love Who Discord server, which is not a dating server.